If you live in small-town America, you might think that you're safe from vampires, but I've got some bad news for you, buddy. Dracula just left his castle, and he's coming to a town near you. These people have no idea that an ancient vampire just moved in down the street, and by the time that they figure out the truth, it's already going to be too late. Whether he turns you into a snack or a servant, nobody is safe. So we're here to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the vampire invasion in Salem's Lot. This neighborhood is about to turn into a hunting ground. Late one afternoon in the small town of Salem's Lot, wealthy businessman Richard Straker is sending someone on a very important mission. He's just moved from Europe and needs the man to get a valuable crate from the docks, giving him extremely detailed instructions on where to deliver it. It's after dark by the time the men reach the house. Opening up the cellar, they lift the crate and nervously carry it down into the darkness, but it's so heavy that they can barely hold it up. Just then, one of the men bumps into a shelf, accidentally dropping the crate on the ground. Turning on the lights, they see that it's cracked open, and for some strange reason, it's filled with dirt. The two of them decide that they'd rather not find out why, but as they're turning to leave, the man starts to hear noises coming from the crate, and his eyes glaze over white like he's in some kind of trance. Lucky for him, his partner snaps him out of it before it's too late, but as soon as they're gone, the lid of the crate slides open, and the terrifying vampire Barlow emerges, hell-bent on turning this town into his new home. Okay, these two idiots don't even realize that they've just killed everyone in town, but we can still use what we know about vampires to come up with a plan to fight back. To even get to this town in the first place, Barlow had to travel in a crate on board a ship. This is because vampires can't travel over running water on their own. He needed to use the boat as a loophole, so that's something that we should keep in mind for later. Now you might be wondering, why would a fancy guy like Barlow ride in the cargo hold? Wouldn't an ancient vampire travel first class with some disguise? And you're absolutely right, but I think there's two answers why. Traveling by crate keeps him safe from direct sunlight, but it also tells me that he didn't want to risk blowing his cover, which means that he's vulnerable and can actually be killed if he's not careful, so that's good news for us. When they dropped the crate, the boys saw that it was full of dirt, because according to legends, vampires have to rest on their home soil to maintain their power. Without it, Barlow would gradually start to become weaker over time, making him easier to kill, so if he's too strong to fight in his current form, we can try getting rid of his dirt instead as a way to even the odds. Now, as they were starting to leave, one of the guys became hypnotized by the crate and started walking towards it like he was in a trance. This is because of that supernatural riz that all vampires have, allowing them to mesmerize their targets into a state of mind control. The only way to resist is to have the mental willpower of David Goggins or be holding a protective symbol like a cross. Otherwise, you have to avoid looking directly at the vampire and have a strong external stimulus to snap out of it, like a friend shaking you or even an electric shock. These guys didn't do any research into what they were carrying, but if they would have taken some time to dig around, they might have seen that there were mysterious disappearances on the ship that brought the crate. Combine that with just about everything else that we've talked about, and it's pretty damn obvious that they've got a vampire inside. Trust me, I get the urge to run here, but think about it. Right now, they're the only two people who know, so who's the vampire going to come after first? The good news is that he's in a weakened state, so what they should have done was grab a sharp piece of wood and take him out before the real trouble begins. The next day, author Ben Mears arrives in town. He actually grew up there and came back after many years of living the city life to get some inspiration for his next book, but that was his biggest mistake. Across town at school, new kid Mark has to stand on business when he's challenged for dominance by the local bully, Richie. The beatdown only stops when their teacher, Mr. Burke, breaks it up. But soon, these two will be joining forces against an even greater threat. After school, Straker spots the boys walking home, and it gives this creep a devious idea. Back at Mark's place, his new friends Danny and Ralphie say that they need to head home before it gets dark. Before they leave, the kid gives Ralphie a harmonica, telling him to play it if he ever gets scared. They're walking down a country road when the most obvious villain car ever pulls up right behind them. It's Straker, looking like Willy Wonka if he wasn't allowed within 1,000 feet of a school zone. But this taxicab ain't going to no chocolate factory. He tries offering the boys a ride, but Danny turns him down, deciding that he'd rather cut through the terrifying woods instead. Ralphie starts to get scared as the woods get more dark, and that's when they hear something moving around in the shadows. The boys pick up the pace, but all of a sudden, Straker sneaks up from behind and grabs the kid before his brother can even notice. By the time he turns, Ralphie is already gone, and there's no sign of him or Straker anywhere in sight. Meanwhile, the man takes him back to the house, telling the boy that he's going to meet his master. Calling out, he shouts to Barlow that he brought him a sacrifice, and all of the candles suddenly go out as the vampire approaches. Through a hole in the bag, he can see the monster slowly creeping down the staircase, but no matter how hard he struggles, there's nothing that he can do. While his servant watches, the vampire brutally claims his first victim, making one down, with 14 more to go. Over a week goes by with no sign of the kid, and the people in town are getting ready to give up. Ben joins up with the search party, but a few of the locals are suspicious that he might have had something to do with it. The strangest part is, his brother can't seem to remember a single detail about the disappearance, even though he was right there when it happened, and the author thinks that he might have intentionally blocked the memories out. That night, Danny is at home lying in bed when he hears his brother's harmonica coming from somewhere outside. Shocked, he climbs out of bed and runs down to the backyard, but the mist is so thick that he can barely see what's out there. As he looks around, he notices something in the grass and finds the boy's harmonica lying there on the ground. That's when the seesaw behind him starts to move on its own, luring him in closer and closer until suddenly, the vampire reaches down from the tree right above him, grabbing his mouth and lifting his entire body into the air. Sometime later, the boy's mother wakes up to find him standing over her bed, telling the woman that he feels sick.
Alright, you guys, let's talk about something serious for just a moment. Have you ever witnessed a car accident or been involved in one yourself? Accidents can be scary and leave you feeling overwhelmed, especially if you're injured. And let's face it, dealing with insurance companies in the aftermath of an injury can be a real hassle. Tons of paperwork, and the stress of getting better can make it hard to focus on what truly matters, which is your health. Here's where a strong team like Morgan & Morgan can come in. They specialize in helping people who've been seriously injured get the compensation they deserve. They're known for fighting for their clients and achieving incredible results. Like, for example, just recently, they secured a whopping $12 million for a car crash victim in Florida. That's 34 times what the insurance company initially offered. Imagine the difference that kind of money could make in your life. Oh, and the best part is that you won't pay Morgan & Morgan a dime unless they win your case. They work on a contingency fee basis, so you have peace of mind knowing that there's no upfront cost. And let me tell you, not all of us can afford the representation that we deserve. So if you've been seriously injured in an accident, Saw game, or sinister death game, and you think you might have a case, don't let the insurance companies walk all over you. Morgan & Morgan might be able to help out. You can click the link at forthepeople.com/beat. The link is also in the description below, or you can hit the QR that's on the screen. It's so easy, and it could potentially change your life. Thanks, Morgan & Morgan, and now, back to the show.
Okay. Damn, man, this family can't seem to catch a break. First, it's little Ralphie getting turned into a kid's meal, and now this? But it all ties back to one person's dumb decisions. And I'm sorry to say it, but Danny, it looks like you f***ed up. Alright, so we started off strong by not getting into the creeper van. Good choice. But then we immediately follow it up by taking the dark path through the woods, far away from any help or witnesses. And unfortunately, this is where it all went off the rails. I mean, kid, are you serious? At that point, you might as well just go help the guy find his lost puppy. Stay on the road, you idiot. Don't go to the most isolated, least visible area possible. That's how you end up with your picture on the back of a milk carton. And when you hear noises on the trail behind you, I don't know, maybe run? Before he sticks you in a potato sack and feeds you to Count Chocula over here. So we're one son down with one more to go for your parents here, and that's when you decide to fall for the old harmonica trick. Man, Straker was really shooting fish in a barrel with you
you, huh? Your brother's been missing for a week, but you hear someone out there in the darkness and think, yep, that's my brother all right, when you know there's a creeper going around snatching kids. But what really sucks is that the vampire didn't just kill him, and what's about to happen now is even worse. I'm sorry, Danny, but you f***ed up. Now, with all that being said, Danny could have led them straight to the killer, but he couldn't seem to remember anything about the attack. This is a common problem after vampire attacks, where they use their mind control to give their victims amnesia. So, in order to figure out what happened, they needed a way to trigger his memory. One way is to get him back to the scene of the crime. He might not remember what he was doing that day, but Mark knows that the boys were last seen at his house. So if they would have taken Danny and followed the route that he'd normally walk home, they would have come across the spot where Straker first approached them, and this might have triggered a memory. Or they could have hired a professional hypnotist to reverse the hypnosis by passing the vampire's mental blocks and forcing the memories to come back. The vampire had to lure Danny outside because of the invitation rule, where vampires can't enter a home unless they're invited in by a resident. This means that one guaranteed way to survive the night is to stay inside, lock the doors and windows, and refuse to open them up for anyone until the morning. Now that Danny's been bitten, he's eventually going to die and become one of the vampire's servants. The only ways to cure that are a stake through the heart and a sunlight bath, or killing the original vampire. So unfortunately, it's too late for Danny, but the rest of the town should keep their kids inside and their doors locked at night until they figure out what the hell is going on.
The parents rush him to the hospital, and after running some tests, they find out that his red blood cell count is dangerously low. They've tried giving him transfusions, but nothing seems to work, leaving the doctors stumped as to what could be wrong. Later on, his mother notices her son reaching for the blood bag, and the boy tells her that he's getting thirsty. Thinking that he wants water, the woman runs out to find a nurse, but as soon as she turns her back, Danny rips down the bag and starts frantically drinking the blood, before falling back down onto the bed. That makes 2 down with 13 more to go. At the funeral, groundskeeper Mike here accidentally falls asleep while he's on his lunch break. By the time that he wakes up, it's already way after dark, and the boy's grave is still sitting wide open. Getting to his feet, he grabs a shovel and starts throwing scoops of dirt into the hole, but just then, something loudly slams against the lid of the coffin, and it's coming from the inside. Confused, the man nervously looks over the edge, where he can hear a voice calling out for help. Jumping into the hole, he quickly throws open the lid, but is surprised to see the boy still lying there the same way he was buried. The man closes it up and climbs back out, thinking that it was all in his head, but when he turns his back, the vampire kid floats up right behind him. This time when he goes back, he realizes that the coffin is empty, and that's when Vampire Danny suddenly jumps up from behind, tackling him straight back into the pit. That makes 3 down with 12 more to go. Later that night, Burke pulls up at the local bar for a drink, where he notices Mike sitting in the corner all by himself. Going over to him, he asks the guy what's wrong, and his friend replies that he hasn't been feeling well ever since he passed out at the boy's funeral. The only thing he remembers seeing was a terrifying pair of eyes, but before he can say any more, it's like something takes over and stops him from speaking. Worried, Burke realizes that there must be some connection to what happened with the kids, and offers to let the guy stay at his place until he can see a doctor in the morning. Back at the house, Burke is putting the guy to bed when he notices 2 strange marks on the side of his neck. Mike can't remember how he got them either, and all of a sudden, the teacher starts to realize the truth about what is going on. Without saying a word, he nervously locks the window to the bedroom and goes downstairs to think things over. It isn't long before the teacher hears a crash on the roof and rushes outside to see what happened. Opening the door, he notices a screen lying on the ground and looks up just in time to see a pair of legs flying into the bedroom window. Without even going back inside, he immediately rushes straight into the town to get some help from Ben and his new girlfriend, Susan. They find him looking stressed down in the lobby, and he says that they need to grab a cross before following him back to the house, promising to explain more once they get there. Standing in the yard, he notices that there's no power and tells them about what he saw going in through the window. That's when he finally admits why he needed their help. As crazy as it sounds, he thinks that Mike is a vampire.
Okay, I know he was just trying to help, but Burke here made a critical mistake by even letting Mark into his house. Even though he hadn't fully transformed yet, he was still susceptible to the vampire's influence, causing him to open the window and let the real vampire inside. Burke didn't realize what was actually happening until it was already too late, but the invitation rule can still help us in the future, because if things get too crazy, then all they have to do is get to private property, and the vampires can't get them as long as they aren't invited in. Now they have a big problem on their hands. They are 99% sure that there might be one or even two vampires upstairs, but there's no way to know what they're about to find inside. At least they brought a cross, but if they do come up against a vampire, then they're going to be outmatched in almost every way by its supernatural strength, speed, and mind control. Burke's wisest decision was calling in some backup first. We always say that there's safety in numbers, and now he has 2 meat shields to use for cover if the vampire attacks. Remember, you don't need to be faster than the vampire to get away, you just need to be faster than the guy standing next to you. First, I'd stock up on some more gear and weapons. Once they're inside, they need to stick together and stay focused, watching each other for any signs of mind control and snapping them out of it if necessary. If Mike attacks, they can use the crosses to stun him and then stake him through the heart and finish the job. As long as you can survive until sunrise, you can always just catch the next bus out of town.
Heading inside, they go upstairs to find Mike lying on the bed with the window still wide open. His body is cold to the touch, but when the writer leans in for a closer look, the marks on his neck have already disappeared. Burke explains that this happens in the stories, and when his friends notice that there's still blood on the pillow, they realize that what the man's saying must be true. Thinking it over, they decide that their only option is to call the police and let them handle it, but agrees that it's better not to bring up the whole vampire thing without proof. When help arrives, Burke subtly hints that it could be connected to the other deaths, but the doctor doesn't think so, saying how the disease that killed Danny is not contagious. Once again, she's completely stumped, but it won't be long before they get their answers. Later that same night, Mark here is lying in bed when he hears something tapping on his bedroom window. Getting up, he's horrified to see that his friend Danny is floating in the mist on the other side of the glass, and he's asking for the kid to let him in. Mark tries to resist him at first, but the vampire uses its powers to put him in a trance, and the boy opens the window, letting the monster fly inside. Snapping out of it, he backs away horrified as the creature slowly walks towards him. But just when it looks like he's done for, the cross on his desk starts to glow with a bright light. Picking it up, he holds it straight against the vampire's face, using its power to send him flying backwards right through the window. It turns out that Mark here is a serious horror fan, and he immediately starts using his comic book knowledge to come up with a plan. Determined to set his buddy free. Opening his journal, he jots down all of the vampire's strengths and weaknesses, and realizes that the only way to stop this is by killing the one who started it all. Back at Burke's house, he's still going over the evidence when he hears a suspicious noise coming from behind him. Looking in the mirror, it seems like nothing is there, but that's when he realizes that he just made a huge mistake. Turning around, he finds himself standing face to face with Vampire Mike, but he's able to grab the cross from his desk and sends the man flying across the room. The teacher follows him into the hallway, but the moment that he lets his guard down, Mike suddenly ambushes him from the shadows, knocking the man down the stairs. Too injured to fight back, he can only crawl away as the monster slowly closes in. But he manages to find the cross just in time, using it to banish the vampire from his house. The next morning, Dr. Cody here is working at the hospital when she gets some bizarre news. Danny's mother was just found dead, and that makes 4 down with 11 more to go. On a hunch, she decides to go have a look at Mike's body down in the morgue, but boy is she surprised to find out that the body is completely gone. Rushing over to Burke's house, she finds the guy lying on the floor looking like he just survived a fight with a vampire, and quickly fills him in on the situation back in town. After regrouping with Ben and Susan, the 4 of them start coming up with a plan. The teacher calls a florist in town to ask for white roses, since they're supposed to help protect from vampires, but finds out that a fancy European man already bought them all. leading them to realize that Straker must be in on it too. They need some way to prove that it's really happening, but that's when the doctor remembers that Danny's mother is still at the morgue. If they're right, then she'll turn into a vampire sometime that night, so they decide to keep an eye on her and see what happens. Now, as for Burke, he's going off on a mission of his own to find out more about the owner of the antique shop.
Okay, at least now everyone's finally on the same page. The situation is only going to get worse tonight, but they still have all day to get prepared, so it's time to start coming up with a better plan. Now, Mark mentioned something important before when he was coming up with a plan of his own. Instead of worrying about Danny, he's focused on going after Barlow himself. In the lore, it's the Master's vampire's power that brings the lesser vampires back from the dead, and they're cursed to remain this way for as long as the top banana still exists. Sometimes taking the Master out instantly frees all of the others from their curse, so it's always better to go straight for the source than to waste valuable time and energy fighting his minions. And that's why the adults are making a huge mistake by splitting up. They're sending the majority of the squad to go watch Danny's mom at the morgue, when what they should be doing is sticking together and going after Barlow instead. Burke here just figured out information that ties Straker to the vampires, so they can narrow their search down to two possible locations, the antique shop and the Marston house. Now that they know where to look, that makes killing Barlow a whole lot easier. Just search both locations, find the vampire, and put a stake through his heart before he strikes again. The good news is that the sun just came up, so they have all day to get prepared, and if you're going to slay a vampire, then you need some vampire slaying tools. First, I'd start with the basics and get everyone across some garlic and as many wooden stakes as they can carry. They should also get some holy water from the church and either fill a bunch of vials and small containers, or even those little spray bottles like some people use on their cats, but after that, it's time to get creative. We know that fire is another classic anti-vampire weapon, so I'd put together some homemade torches, Molotov cocktails, or grab a flare gun from a shop in town. If someone carried a big mirror, they could use it to reflect sunlight and burn the vampire to dust. For ranged attacks, they could try crafting a crossbow that fires stakes, or using a slingshot with holy water balloons. Once they figure out where he's hiding, they'll want to attack during daylight so that there's nowhere for the vampire to run. Once they have him weakened enough, that's when somebody goes in for the kill shot, stake him through the heart, and burn the body once it's over to confirm the kill.
While the adults are still busy strategizing, Mark here has already taken matters into his own hands. Armed with a wooden stake, he quietly sneaks up to the old house and makes his way into the basement, where he starts looking around for the vampire's coffin. Suddenly, the boy feels a hand on his shoulder, but it's only his teacher, who also came there to do the same thing. Just then, someone slams the door behind them, locking it from the outside. It looks like Straker was watching them after all, and now they're trapped in the basement with no way out. Lighting a candle, Burke leads the way over to the steps, only to find out that they've already been destroyed. Their only chance is to lift Mark up while the teacher stays down below, but while they're distracted, Barlow slowly starts to emerge from his coffin. The boy makes it just in time, turning on the light just as the candle goes out, when all of a sudden, Barlow sinks his fangs into the man's neck, and his servant takes Mark before he can escape. That makes 5 down with 10 more to go. Meanwhile, the others are over at the morgue just waiting for something to happen. Now that they're here, Susie finally decides to mention that they might want something to protect themselves, but by now it's already too late. Just then, the body starts to move as the woman calls out for her son, and Dr. Cody quickly grabs a jar of tongue depressors to make crosses. For some reason, the trick doesn't seem to be working, so they scramble to find some tape as the body sits straight up on the table. Panicking, the three of them start praying for their lives, and to their surprise, it actually starts to work. But when Ben holds it up, the cross immediately falls apart, and the vampire tackles Dr. Cody into a corner. Grabbing the sheet, Ben holds the monster back as it lunges at the doctor. She grabs a scalpel to defend herself, but the creature only laughs in her face as she realizes that it's not even bleeding. Overwhelming them, it gets close enough to bite the doctor's neck, but Susie finishes the cross just at the last second, burning the vampire until it explodes into ashes. It looks like they won, but there's still one problem. The doctor got bit, and she only has a matter of seconds before she starts to turn. She has the others grab some disinfectant and a rabies vaccine, pouring the solution on her wound before injecting the medicine into her arm. Holding the cross up to her as a test, the woman breathes a sigh of relief when she doesn't burst into flames, and it looks like she's going to be alright, at least for now. The crew rushes back over to Burke's house, only to see that two of the vampires are already chilling on his roof. Ben can tell that it's too late to save their friend, and now their only choice is to head for the town church.
Okay, man, I swear, every time it looks like Ben and the others are making progress, they actually just end up making the situation even worse. Burke here made a big mistake by going into the house on his own. This could have been their chance to take Barlow by surprise, but now he knows that they're onto him, which is only going to make him that much harder to fight. Now, with that being said, on the positive side of things, what just happened with the doctor might be some of the most important information that we've learned yet. Dr. Cody still doesn't know exactly what causes people to transform, but when she was bitten, she applied her existing medical knowledge to treat it like a real-world infection, and it ended up saving her life. First, she cleaned the wound using hydrogen peroxide by quickly killing off bacteria and other pathogens, and then followed it up by quickly treating herself with a dose of the rabies vaccine. Similar to a vampire bite, rabies spreads when the infected saliva enters the bloodstream. The symptoms develop fast, and it's guaranteed to be fatal unless you treat it quickly, which is why the doctor was in such a rush to get the medication into her body. We don't need to understand exactly why it works, we just know that it works, and that's good enough for me. So from now on, everyone in the squad should be carrying several doses of them at all times. They could even try administering a dose before they go into battle. That way, they'll already be protected against the effects of a bite. For some added insurance, the doctor might want to call all of the nearby hospitals and warn them about a potential rabies outbreak. It's much more believable than vampires, and if they're able to treat the condition before any more victims turn, this stops Barlow's army from getting any bigger, even if the outside world doesn't yet know the whole truth.
Hours later, Mark is still trapped inside the old house, desperately struggling to get himself free. Hearing Straker coming, he finally manages to get loose just in time, and ambushes the man with a golf club before he even knows what hit him, making 6 down with 9 more to go. The others head to the church looking for help from the priest, but that's when Mark walks in with a bag full of steaks. He's about to head out and slide on the vampires for a second time, but the priest stops him before he goes, asking to see for himself. Mark leads them all the way back up to the house, saying that they'll find the man's body on the 2nd floor. Only the doc is brave enough to go up, but before she can, the door to the basement slowly creaks open. Circling around, the group climbs down through the hatch on the outside, and it isn't long before they start hearing strange noises coming from the shadows. Ben grabs a steak from the bag just as they're suddenly ambushed by Vampire Burke, but accidentally misses the heart and hits him in the shoulder. He gets knocked down in the chaos, but his friends open the hatch just as the vampire is pulling him in, causing it to burn when it's hit by sunlight. Taking another steak, Ben apologizes to their friend before finishing him off. But the head vampire isn't there, and they still have to save the rest of the town. Splitting up, they decide to warn as many people as possible before meeting back up at the church just before sundown. As for Ben and Susie, their first stop is at her mom's place, and she is not too happy to see her daughter hanging around with the writer from out of town. Ben decides to give them some space, but that's when the woman starts going off about how she just got a new job as the vampire's loyal servant. All of a sudden, Susie screams as one of the vampires sinks his teeth into her neck, ambushing her from around the corner. Ben's able to drag her back out into the sunlight, but he knows that he doesn't have long before she turns. At Mark's house, the priest tries to convince his parents that they're all in danger, but they refuse to listen to a single word he says. Just then, they hear a knock on the front door, and the dad insists on answering it, even though they try to warn him that it's a trap. While they're all focused on the front door, Barlow sneaks inside and grabs the boy's mother, killing her before they even know he's there. Holding him off, the priest tells Mark to run, but for some reason, the vampire doesn't seem affected when he holds up the cross. By making him doubt his faith, the cross loses all its power, and there's nothing that he can do as the vampire bites his neck, making 9 down with 6 more to go. As for Mark, his only choice is to quickly take cover inside the treehouse. Using a stake to hold the creatures back, he shuts all of the windows so that they can't get inside, and sits there listening as his vampire friends dare him to come out and play. Ben speeds back to the church and rushes Susie inside, but as soon as he steps through the door, the girl is already tweaking out. He begs the doctor to get another shot, but the woman can tell that it's already too late, and says that the only way to help her is to make it all end. Suddenly, the girl pushes him off and takes off running out of the church, completely transformed into a vampire. Ben runs after her, but quickly realizes that he made a mistake when he sees that he's surrounded by every vampire in town. Sprinting back towards the church, he almost makes it when one of them suddenly flies over and lifts him up into the sky. But the doctor throws him a stake just in time, and the two of them crash back to the ground as Ben pierces it through the vampire's heart, making 10 down with 5 more to go.
Okay. Well, damn. Tough break for our boy Ben here. I think it's safe to say that things aren't looking too good for the survivors. The fighters on the human side are dropping like flies, and for everyone that they lose, Barlow adds another vampire to his army. They went from having the advantage to being completely outnumbered in just a matter of 2 nights. And if this keeps up, it won't even matter if you escape this town because the vampires will just spread to everywhere else. Their only hope now is using the few advantages that they have left to stop Barlow while they still can. The most important thing is that they have the church as a safe zone where they can reliably spend the night, since it sits on holy ground where no vampire can enter. The vampires might have the night completely under control, but during the day they're still forced to hide in places without direct sunlight, which leaves Ben and Dr. Cody the daylight hours to work on their plans. The way I see it, they only have 2 choices here: either try to ditch town the first thing in the morning or keep trying to fight back. Like we said before, with the way that it's spreading, it won't be long before it takes over the entire state, so even though running might seem like a better idea, I guess they really don't have a choice. Here's the plan. They need to wait for morning, grab their crosses and stakes, and start systematically searching the town one area at a time. This could take a while, so as they go, they should gather supplies like food and water to bring back to the church. I'd try to recruit any survivors they find along the way because we need all the meat shields we can get. And anyone who we save means 1 less minion for Barlow. Before, we said that going after the lesser vampires was a waste of time, but now that changes. Since we have to go house to house, we might as well kill them if we find them, because every vampire you kill during the day is 1 less you have to worry about at night. Following this strategy, they just have to hope to get lucky and find the right house. The only problem is that it could take a while, and there isn't a lot of time to waste, but I have one other idea that might lead them straight to him. We know that Anne has replaced Straker as Barlow's human servant, so what they need to do is secretly follow her around and watch where she goes, because she could end up leading them straight to his hideout.
In the morning, it looks like these 2 are the only ones left alive in the entire town. They head to Mark's place first, and next to the bodies of his parents, they find a note from the kid saying that he's going after Barlow himself. Back in town, Mark breaks into the vampire's antique shop, accidentally cutting off his hand on a shard of broken glass. Holding a stake, he nervously makes his way towards the back room, peeking behind the curtain for any sign of the monster. It looks like another dead end, until suddenly Danny jumps out from the shadows and shoves him up against the wall. But just when he's about to bite, the vampire looks down and realizes that Mark got him, ending his curse once and for all. Outside, he ends up running into the 2 adults. They want to leave town while they still can, but Mark's still insisting on going after Barlow. Looking around, Ben suddenly notices that there isn't a single car left on the street, and that's when they realize where all the vampires have been hiding out. Sure enough, their hunch turns out to be right, and they find everyone's favorite car parked at the drive-in theater on the outskirts of town. The writer spots Susie's car in the crowd, and when he opens the trunk, he finds his undead girlfriend taking a power nap inside. Heartbroken, he asks the doctor to finish her off, but just as she's about to do it, she suddenly gets absolutely obliterated by a sneak attack from the girl's crazy-ass mom, making 11 down with 4 more to go. The woman just starts unloading in their general direction, forcing Mark to duck under a car as the writer scrambles for cover. To make matters worse, the sun is just ducking down behind the movie screen, and now all of the vampires are waking up to join the party. Terrified, the two of them run for their lives, dodging blasts from the shotgun as they race towards the daylight. Mark makes it to safety, but the writer gets tackled before he can escape, using one stake to score a sick double kill against the forces of evil. The problem is that there's a lot more vampires where that came from, but Mark isn't about to leave a good man behind, so he hops in a car and takes out the supports for the movie screen, letting in the sunlight and burning every last vampire to dust. Unfortunately, this still leaves the crazy old lady with the shotgun, but Ben jumps out of the way just as his buddy turns her into a speed bump, making 12 down with 3 more to go. But their work is not done yet. They still need to kill Barlow himself, and that's when they spot a creepy-looking van parked on the side of the building. Opening the back, they find Barlow's coffin stashed inside. The only problem is that it's locked up tight, so Ben has to race against the clock for something to get it open.
Okay, they've done pretty good so far with a lot working against them, so it would be a shame to blow it now at this last moment. The only problem is they're surrounded by vampires and the sun is going down, so there's only a matter of minutes before the head honcho wakes up. The pressure is making him think that he has to deal with the problem here and now, but really, all he's doing is wasting time when there's another solution that they could be trying. Instead of trying to pry open the coffin here, they should start up the van or quickly load it into the back of their car. Then, while one of them works on getting it open, the other one can take the wheel and start driving, making sure that they stay in the sunlight for as long as possible. This way, they can get some more distance between themselves and the vampire army, and buy themselves more time to get into Barlow's casket. If they can't get it open, then I would just drive into the nearest body of water and send the whole van to the bottom of the river. Since he can't cross running water, I don't see a way that he could get out of that, and when we take care of Barlow, hopefully all of the other vampires die off too.
Grabbing a crowbar from one of the cars, the two of them struggle to pull it open, but it's too late. Suddenly, the tool gets ripped right out of Ben's hands, and the lid of the coffin explodes as a whirlwind of energy rushes out. The two of them decide to take cover inside of the nearby building, but what they don't realize is that they're not alone. Just then, vampire Susie attacks the writer from behind, tossing Mark straight through a window when he tries to step in. The fight spills over into the kitchen, where Susie tackles him into the breaker box, restarting the building's power. Outside, Mark looks up to see Barlow standing over him, surrounded by the eerie white light of the projector. The kid takes cover under the broken screen, but inside, Ben here is still fighting for his life. Grabbing a chair, he hits her with the Uno reverse, pulling off a leg and piercing her through the chest. It's a stake through the heart and you're to blame, and that makes 13 down with 2 more to go. Meanwhile, Mark is still hiding out underneath the screen, but he can hear Barlow searching for him just a few feet away. Running from car to car, he tries turning on the lights to help him see in the dark until suddenly, the vampire starts reaching down to grab him straight through the screen. The kid manages to get away at first, but eventually he's got nowhere left to run, and the monster grabs him by the shirt, snarling down at him with its razor-sharp teeth. Just when it looks like he's done for, Ben pierces a stake straight through the vampire's face, before flipping him around and driving it down into his heart. He may have killed everyone else in town, but at least Barlow is finally dead, and the world is safe thanks to our 2 survivors. As for Ben and Matt, there's nothing else that they can do besides find a new place to try and start over. But I think we all learned a valuable lesson. If you're ever in a town where people start rising up out of their graves, just get the f*** out of there while you still have the chance.
Salem's Lot. Dope movie. Long gestating remake, but you know, more Stephen King is good in my book. But anyways, if you would have done anything differently, let me know down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe, and check out that How to Beat playlist for more videos just like this one. I'll see you guys in the next video, and have a damn good day.